So,
Hi, Joe. How's it going?
what's going on?
Lots of stuff.
No.
Yeah, it's been a crazy week for news.
Really?
Yeah, lots of stuff.
All the people in the media must love that then.
Yeah, it certainly gives them something to do.
Yeah. It's always been the way.
It's not just that stuff's happening, but stuff's always happening.
Yeah.
But there's also layers of fake stuff that happens too, and they get to write about that. And then years later, it comes out, actually, that wasn't true.
Yeah.
Like the Steele dossier. Quietly released this week,
Yeah. Ain't that always the way though? I mean, and people...
But that generated 4 years of headlines for
Yeah.
CNN, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow,
Clicks.
in which they had a fantastic kind of, it's a bit like an inflation financial bubble, a speculative bubble on the stock market, not really based on any reality. There's still an underlying economic reality, which has, lots of exciting twists and turns in the real world for real people. But there's a whole fake economy over it that generates its own interests.
Yeah.
Wealth, if you're lucky. Most people just get shafted by it, though. And it's similar with in the information sphere. This massive inflationary bubble, speculative bubble called Russiagate.
Mm-hmm.
Just quietly, completely undermined last week by the revelation that the source or sources, certainly the prime source, funnily enough, a Russian emigre living in the United States, was indicted by John Durham for basically lying to the FBI. And it was his key statements that formed the basis of the Steele dossier
Yeah.
at the time. And yeah, that was all fake news. Like Trump said, he was right. It was fake news. So,
Yeah. But that was in itself claimed to be fake news. Trump calling it fake news was fake news.
that became the news.
Everything he said was fake news. So
Right.
when he says something's fake news, that in itself is fake news, even though he's telling the
Exactly,
truth. But does it not make you kind of depressed about the state of...
Journalism. for
well,
sure.
just journalism, but also it gets to journalism, obviously, but behind journalism or behind journalists are human beings, and they're pandering information to other human beings, fake information to other human beings, who then take it up at the time, as they did over the 4 years of Trump administration, Russiagate, all the bullshit around that, the lies, the misinformation. People ate it up. Were shouting about it on Twitter. Trump's a terrorist, Trump's a dictator, Trump's a Nazi, Trump said this, that, the other. All of it basically fueled by the media, fake media coverage of this particular story in particular about Russiagate and his collusion with Russia, which didn't happen, never happened, completely fabricated with this dodgy Steele dossier, funded by the Democrats, funded by essentially the Washington establishment, who we've talked about previously many times about them basically being anti-Trump because of who Trump was and what he wanted to do. Primarily, or summed up in a nutshell, Trump wanted to be president, as in commander-in-chief, as in having the right to make decisions to direct the course of the country's foreign and domestic policies. No, that's not the way it works in America. It hasn't worked that way in America for a long time. The POTUS, as evidenced by Biden, is a ceremonial position, more or less. The real decisions taken behind the scenes by career politicians, career bureaucrats, it's the Washington establishment, quote unquote. They hated Trump essentially because of that was his attitude of taking control of the situation, actually assuming the position of commander-in-chief as it's written down in the description, in the job description. And he wanted to do things. They wanted to get rid of him from the get-go. So they pushed out a bunch of fake news, lies, smear campaigns. Millions, hundreds of millions of people believed it and ran with it, and it became part of their reality. A few years later, do they even know that they were lied to? It doesn't matter, right? Because they have an image of Trump and that whole era that's stuck with them now. That's part of their reality now. That's part of actual history.
Well,
And it doesn't matter if something comes out now to refute it all.
You began by asking, do the people who specifically wrote these
Well, the ones who wrote it and the ones who swallowed
do they
it.
care now that... no.
Well,
I think in there, they will quietly tell themselves, either at the time, if they're smart
it was
enough,
justified.
or now, if they care to pay attention to that development, that, yeah, but look...
It was
this is
justified
Trump.
anyway,
This is
right?
politics, we're at war here.
Even if it wasn't technically true,
yeah.
it was something had
Their
to be done about
beliefs
this guy.
remain true.
Right, but it's in the realm of belief rather than
Yes.
actual fact.
Yeah.
And that's my problem with journalists. Behind journalists are ordinary people, and they're pandering these lies that they're believing themselves to other ordinary people. And the response from both of them is the same, which is just to go with whatever feels best to me, whatever feels like it should be the truth based on my subjective, personal, whatever opinions. Then I'm going to go with that. And even when after the fact it comes out that it's false for both the journalists and the people who believed it at the time, it doesn't matter that it's wrong. It's still true.
They'll respond to you with something on the effect of, but look at his face.
Yeah, you do not see the way he was.
Listen to him. Look at the way he carries himself.
When it comes down to it,
you know that I know that we know. That,
he shouldn't have been present because of the way he looks, essentially. That was enough to...
It was a mistake, yeah.
Yeah, and it was enough. It was justified in fabricating a lot of lies and disinformation that, let's say, they believe made sure he wasn't re-elected was justified. It was justified in fabricating those lies
for people's own good.
Because he should never have been president anyway.
Stupid people voted for Trump, they believe. And there are too many people who shouldn't be voting.
Right.
But that's something we have to live with. The fact is they have a vote.
Yeah.
And so we're just implementing course correction measures here, and whatever it takes.
It's like I didn't like him, Orange Man bad, therefore whatever got him out was justified. That's why it's not exactly a moral position to take. Like, you know what I mean? There isn't a lot of... There's no hang-ups there about telling lies to get your way and all that kind of stuff, right? That's what I'm kind of getting at here is that's the state of the average person.
Yeah.
So people shouldn't be under any illusions.
In the current climate, for sure.
Or maybe humanity in general.
Can I give you a more recent example?
Yeah.
Much smaller level, but still, it was a blockbuster. This would be a blockbuster story in any other year, perhaps 10 years ago. The decade-long governor of New York, Cuomo, was ousted extra legally, well, legally, technically, but outside the normal electoral cycle this year. And do you remember, roughly what the gist of that was? Why he was forced to go?
Because of sexual abuse.
Yes.
Against employees, yeah.
Allegations of sexual abuse. That's being followed and really actually only looked into by one person. Someone who doesn't like him, he admits, is Michael Tracy, is an independent journalist in New York. Now, he would be a left-leaning guy himself, but he's a good guy in the sense that he's honest and sincere. And he says, okay, so these are my colors. This is where my background is. You can tell it from the flavor of my tweets or the tone of my writing. But, and mea culpa, I don't like this guy, so I can see why everyone wants to jump at him. But can we just actually look at the facts of the case here? Anyway, he wrote something recently that his Cuomo's daughter tweeted. Finally, someone's looked at it. And it's gained traction that way, thanks to her retweeting this story. Because Michael Tracy's story didn't get published in any big...
Right.
Or it was put on his Substack account. Anyway, it's a very simple look down. He said he looked into the key woman, 25 at the time, who claimed sexual abuse by Cuomo against her as a young office worker in his campaign or whatever. The woman is she was legally found to have made up the same allegation against someone she, quote, wanted ousted from her faculty while she was at university.
Right.
They did get rid of him at the time, but then there was a comeback, maybe the guy's family or something, and an investigation. And they found that this woman had done exactly the same kind of setup where she'd made up bullshit because she didn't like the guy. But don't know what their beef was. There was some political clash at college or whatever. She has a track record, a proven actual track record of doing that.
And she did this.
She's only, someone could always make claims, but the other big element in this story is that the Democratic establishment around Cuomo in New York took advantage of it. Specifically, under Cuomo, the Attorney General, Letitia James, who has an admitted interest in becoming governor herself.
Right.
And she was the one who broke all freaking due process protocols by listing all of the allegations in a press conference that basically condemned him in trial by media.
Condemned who?
Governor Cuomo.
Right.
She named all the allegations against him. She basically conducted, as a kind of prosecutor at a press conference, all the claims against Cuomo. And he was gone within days.
Yeah.
Under media pressure. You know, he's just resigned. But
To go back to the guy who you were saying is an enemy of doesn't like Cuomo.
that's Letitia James, black woman. She
sorry.
was the top prosecutor under him. She still is, I think, because of course it's only been a replacement. There hasn't been an election.
And she's the one who made the allegations.
No. It's someone else. It was
Right.
I don't know, an assistant,
Right.
a much younger woman. But there's some, no one knows. See, Tracy says he's looked at this long and hard. There isn't evidence of a conspiracy, say, between, okay, so I'll claim abuse, and then someone else goes, good, we'll work with that to get me into power. It's not even that dark and conspiratorial. What he's saying is, I've looked at it up and down. The main element in all of this is pure laziness. The journalist just
Don't care.
couldn't be arsed to look into this. And it was the laziness that just went with, oh, it's a Me Too against him. Well, I don't want to get, on the wrong side of that. So everyone would just go, aye, vote him out, aye.
But
That's essentially it.
But I'm glad Cuomo's gone.
I know, but
And why is so you're saying this isn't a story when it should be a story, because Cuomo was obviously part of the establishment. He was favored by the establishment, though, as everybody. He was the one taking. He killed a bunch of people in care homes during the COVID
the
lockdown.
fact of the matter is he won officially, handsomely, in the 3 times he was elected as governor of New
Yeah,
York.
but that doesn't say much to me anyway. In the sense of, I have no faith in voters, and for me,
But you see the problem there. You're saying, I don't like him for things he's done, so it's fine that he goes.
right.
I don't care how he
So
goes.
are you sure there's no from what you've seen, there's no
No substantial basis to it.
no substance to the evidence that there was sexual abuse or
Certainly not rape, no.
no, but grabbings and different things, or just sexual harassment, even like that. There was nothing that he could have been accused of doing that was inappropriate to his female staff or people around him.
Michael Tracy is sure
But there's nothing.
Yeah,
So
and
that-
he dislikes him.
So that right. So he's a good person to actually. To
You see what I mean?
investigate.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
he doesn't. The last person he wants to defend.
Right.
That's why.
So, but that's-
Tracy's an interesting guy, because then when it came to Trump, he was also going, "Hang on a second, are we all just engaged in a pylon here?"
Right. But Cuomo's hoisted it on his own petard in that respect, because he was obviously part of
Right.
that whole, supporting woke leftist kind of, radical feminist, that whole dynamic that's been going on for quite a long time. He was part of that. I mean, he's on that side of the fence in that respect. You know what I mean? He was anti-Trump, anti all of that. He's pro-establishment and stuff.
Yeah.
And So I would be. I can't sit here and complain about the media making up stories to oust effectively in one way or another oust Trump, if I'm not gonna. If I'm going to also be happy about them doing the same thing essentially for ousting Cuomo, even though I don't like Cuomo, not that I necessarily like Trump, but certainly I don't not like Trump in the same way I don't like Andrew Cuomo,
Right.
No, the whole thing was just, it's complicated. Well, it's a good example of how the whole thing is very complicated, and you can't just take things at face value.
Yeah.
Everything's nuanced. You got to look at it all from both sides, and you got to be honest with yourself and make sure you're not being too much of a hypocrite. Although hypocrisy is a way of life for most people, but
For good or bad, Cuomo couldn't be beaten in an election.
yeah, how did that happen?
So
The guy just come-
if,
Do you know why?
if we're all agreeing that elections aren't important anymore, let's shelve them, and it's open season on just slandering each other.
Right.
Then fine, let's go for it. Let's make that the standard for everything.
And let's just smear people.
Let's
right and
just
centre.
have it all out, because
Yeah.
that's where this is all going.
Yeah. Or where it already is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't handle the whole thing with over the pandemic. It was just so galling to me over the lockdown business, where Cuomo was basically had been shunting people out of hospitals, elderly out of hospital, back into care homes, where tens of thousands of them in New York State died.
How unique was he in that? I've heard
No, it
here about
happened-
the UK.
Of course,
like
it happened.
80,000 people at this point.
Of course, it happened across the world, right?
Yeah.
But my problem is that then he was standing up as the protector of New York, the strong leader in a crisis. Everybody loved him. There were people talking, women in particular, obviously, and some gay men claiming to had a new sexual preference, which was or a new sexual orientation, which was homosexuals.
I think that says more about the people.
Well, exactly. That's my problem. My
Yeah.
problem is the people and the way they respond to this whole situation. And obviously, like we started out saying, my problem is the way people respond to the fact that everything they believed about Trump, the meat, the core of their the core allegations and evidence that they used to convince themselves and allow themselves to be convinced by the media that Trump was this evil white supremacist Russian colluding Nazi was all false. It's been proven right now to be false. We saw it at the time very clearly. It wasn't very hard to see that it was completely made up. It was part of the form in which the establishment has been doing. You know, they've gone about doing many other similar things in nature in the past. So we spotted it immediately. It was ridiculous, but at the time, people believed all of that. Now it's been proven to be a lot of people believed it, willingly believed it, willfully believed it, and now that it's been proven false, like you just said, quietly in the past week, little articles. Oh yeah, that whole Steele dossier thing about the Russian collusion thing. Yeah, all made up.
The Washington Post just went back to its original articles it published at the time. You know, it's bombshell exposés.
Yeah.
Democracy dies in darkness and all that, and they just removed chunks from the article,
Right,
and put a note at the end to say we've done so.
Right.
That's
We
it.
just removed all the lies that we had in this article that convinced you that.
all the definite provable ones, and
Yeah.
they're going to creep up. There'll be more, you know.
Yeah.
It's funny though that the whole right, you know, it drove us nuts during the last couple of Trump's years, because the right wing was like, oh, just you wait, tomorrow there's going to be bombshell revelations. And well, funnily enough, the Durham investigations, among others, did yield results. They were always going to in court. This is the thing. Trial by media is one thing. When it actually gets to a court case, as we saw with Rittenhouse trial last week, it's a different world.
Yeah.
You know, reality, facts,
Yeah.
evidence still apply in these things. So,
Yeah, there's certain. I mean, the whole justice system is I suppose it's like a two-tier. Well, there's two-tier in a certain sense. There's cases and claims that go to court or are litigated in one way or another, that if they in some way involve the state, or that could, as part of the process, as part of the trial process, could involve the state and reveal state secrets, then there's complete lockdown on it. Ones that don't, you get live cams of the entire process, as you just said with the Rittenhouse trial. But for an example is what do you call her?
Maxwell.
Maxwell.
That's just started, though, in fairness. But yeah, I expect.
Still, she was in and out at various trials and stuff. I mean, at various hearings.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's no picture. There's only those badly
Sketches.
sketched.
She was granted an interview this week, though, with Daily Mail.
Oh yeah. So it's only. But then, yeah, what happened over I don't know. Yeah, but certainly, I don't think the trial is going to be televised on that one, right? Unless this whole process has been setting it up in a certain way that they know what the trial will actually.
Yeah.
What it'll be about, and what will be in the trial and what won't be in the trial, you know. But yeah, it's interesting. Even like I was thinking, because I don't think he tried it, but you know Tsarnaev, the Boston bomber, the younger guy, Jokar, or I don't know what his name was. Surname was Tsarnaev, one of the two Boston bombers, the younger brother who survived. He's been in prison and all that kind of stuff, but his trial also wasn't, because the judge in the Rittenhouse trial referenced that at one point when I was watching it. He referenced the Tsarnaev trial as just in terms of what he was talking about, and it made me think as well that there was that's not an example where you had sketches of what was going on in court, because it's got national security considerations probably involved, and so the public don't get to hear about it, right? So a whole other world going on there behind the scenes that the public is not given access to, and they're just fed stories that are deemed appropriate for them to hear, and which actually might lead into, you can give a brief synopsis of it maybe, you can give a bit of a promotion for it. Last night you watched the latest Oliver Stone JFK documentary on the JFK
tomorrow's the
assassination.
anniversary, 58 years and counting. 58 years, and there's still a state secret.
Right.
I mean, anyone born in like the last 20, 30 years, they're kind of, in a cynic way, they're just smart. A lot of them anyway. We call them millennials, but they also have a smart, there's a lot of memes out there where they're just like, if you're still keeping it secret from the time of our grandparents, that to us is an admission of guilt,
Guilt, right.
state guilt.
But that's an
Anyway.
example of what we were talking about before as well, is that at this point, and maybe, I don't know if it's now, if it's particularly bad now, or if it's always been this way, but it seems that it's in human society, it's fine for major scandalous state crimes to be publicly admitted to in a particular way, but nonetheless publicly admitted to, and there to be no action taken on it. If no one takes any action, the public doesn't take any action.
Mm-hmm.
And if no one takes any action, and then the public are left with, maybe some of them question it, but a lot of them just don't even question anything, or just ignore it and just go with the official story because that's easier, because it's a news bite. Oswald killed Kennedy. That's fine. I don't want to think about it. But I mean, the implications of like in JFK, and even in the case of Trump, it's like crazy. You have like a parallel government in the case of Trump, a parallel government ousted effectively. Even if leaving aside any shenanigans around the election, the narrative would be that the allegations made against him during his administration, during his term, were so severe that he was unelectable afterwards, and that's why he lost. You could say that's why he lost. So it was effectively a coup by some kind of parallel government, real government, who had the power to do that and get rid of him.
Through mostly,
And nobody cares.
Through mostly the guy who became president next,
Yeah.
LBJ.
Do some people know that that's the case? That they recognize that there is that power and they're happy with that power? Because it's kind of like a secret government, like a secret Santa or something, like a real...
That's an interesting sociological phenomenon, because
It's
a
fine.
number of commentators, all the way up to I say up because, he's a esteemed guy, academic, Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah.
Pretty much, they talk about the deep state. And yeah, that's the way it should be.
The deep state is keeping us safe,
Yeah,
basically.
the intel
So
community.
it's a rear guard, or it's like another parallel government that is there as an insurance against if ever
Yes.
the overt government goes wrong. You need to have those structures in place in order to safeguard democracy, and by definition, it has to be done in secret. Therefore, it's not is it democracy anymore? What's the definition of democracy when you get into that kind of stuff? I don't know. Anyway, JFK.
I could talk for now about it, because you see, there's a kind of a mystery at the heart of JFK. There's the mystery of who killed him, but there's also a mystery of something is guiding the revelations that we have had from then till now.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, the documentary is called JFK Revisited, Through the Looking Glass. And JFK Revisited is a reference to the fact that Oliver Stone's movie in 1991 was called JFK. So he's saying, well, here we are 30-some years later. What's come out since?
I did a movie on it that was dramatized. He
references a couple of times.
And here's a factual documentary now.
Here's a factual documentary, and we're going to zoom in specifically on things that have emerged since then. And it's... He's entitled to do it because his movie in 91 had a sociological effect, namely rekindling of interest in and calls for the publishing of documents.
And it red-pilled a bunch of people, I'd say.
Probably, yeah.
On the JFK thing.
Yeah, in 91. And that forced the then H.W. Bush government to go, okay. And they passed a bill that would commit to a certain time period. I think they said initially by 2029, everything would have to be released. That wasn't enough. I think they then brought that forward to 25 years hence, at the latest. Everything we have within reason. There's a clause within it. Everything that can possibly be released and redacted will be declassified and so on. But a lot has, and there are some good details, and Oliver Stone put them together in his documentary. Probably the main revelation for most people, although it's been
who are familiar with it already,
who are familiar with the topic, is that it's quite clear from Stone's new documentary that Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone gunman who officially killed, all on his lonesome, the President of the United States of America, was not in the building from which
was not in the book depository from which
there.
JFK was supposedly shot.
And the specific revelations...
Making it difficult for him to shoot him.
Yes. So when he's saying, I'm just a patsy, as he's being led from place to place, in the aftermath, he's
right. He's telling the truth.
He was telling the truth.
His statement...
That's a bombshell development because, if he's not in the building right there, you've got, okay, so it's wide open now.
And
Who, from where,
Yeah.
fired.
In the official kind of account or details that people might have seen, and a lot of people would have seen Oswald, those little snippets of Oswald as he's taken from jail to prison or to jail to a courthouse,
Yeah.
wherever he was going, where the media tried to get a few questions in, and he's being ushered along, and he says, one of them asked him, "Did you kill the president?" He said, "I didn't kill anyone," and then he followed it up by saying, "I'm just a patsy."
Yeah.
Those 5 or 6 words were probably the only true words spoken, at least at the time, in the entire, process of coming up with the official explanation that they came up with within a few weeks.
Yeah.
Of Oswald killed JFK and he was shot from behind from the book depository. That was all false. Just before you go into it a little bit, I just want to add, because it just occurred to me, that this is why, and I think I've talked about this before, why conspiracy theories terrify people so much. And this is a good example, because if you get, like, for example, some people I know who are not into conspiracy theories and don't even care about them, average members of the public, let's say, who read the daily news and don't think very much about it, if they were to watch that documentary or other documentaries that really show that it's impossible for anybody to believe that Oswald killed JFK, and that there clearly was a broad scale kind of conspiracy to kill JFK, they understand from watching that those details imply or kind of presage a power that is so cunning, ruthless, and powerful that now that they've been made aware that it exists, they realize instinctively there's nothing you can do about it. It's so powerful that there's nothing you can do about it. So they without them telling you this, if the average person that comes across these ideas, that's what I was kind of saying. I think I was saying it the other day. All conspiracy theories tend to imply, all of them have as a common theme, that idea of a very extremely powerful, cunning, ruthless system behind the overt system. And why would I even bother contemplating that when built into it is the idea that I can do nothing against such a monstrous power? So I just have to, it's almost like...
Or worse, if I go too far in my activism.
I might be in trouble.
Yeah.
I might get in trouble with it. Yeah, exactly. So you can see how people shut off, or it creates a kind of dissociation where they just go, la, 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 what you're telling me is a bit scary. I don't want to hear it. And very often they'll respond to it in anger. And that's where you get the whole, a certain amount of anger, at very least a lot of derision and anger towards the idea of conspiracy theories, because they all imply this serious power that people can do nothing about by definition. And so they don't want to hear about it, So just shut up. Shut up and take the jab. Shut up and take the shot. Shut up and take your vaccine. Mm-hmm. So it's understandable. Because I'm all the time, like, a big part of my in research and all the stuff we've researched over the years is I want to understand why it's so few, relatively few people who can go there and are interested in these kinds of things. And they're all fact-based things. Like, I mean, the JFK conspiracy is totally fact-based. The conspiracy against Trump is totally fact-based. But why so many people dismiss those facts out of hand and get angry at you, and maybe if it goes far enough they'll tell you to shut the hell up and you might get into a fight over it or something. Why that happens, why those people, ordinary people, have such a strong reaction to that idea of conspiracy theories. So I've thought off and on quite a lot about trying to understand the psychology behind it, and that's kind of like more or less the best explanation I can come up with. We've talked previously about people being very dependent on authority and feeling kind of vulnerable in life in general at a kind of subconscious level, and that plays into it as well, But so part of this is me trying to understand my own position as much as understanding other people's position, or how the two connect, and how the two are very, very much separated.
Yeah. Well, the democratically elected president of the United States, at the zenith of his power in 1963, had his head blown open, and everyone in the world saw it, similar to 9/11. Not everyone has TVs as much, but eventually everyone in Africa, Asia. Everyone's heard about it or knew about it.
Saw the pictures.
And that is a way of getting something done politically, okay, on the one hand, but it's also a way of telling people, yeah, this is the power we wield, this is the terror we commit.
Don't challenge us.
They
Don't
will
rock
blow
the
your
boat.
we can blow his head off in broad daylight and get away with it.
How much easier is
Are
it
you
for
willing
you
to take his place?
Yeah, or
Are you serious?
how much easier is it for us to do it to you if we
Yeah.
can do it to the President of the United States? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a very clear chilling effect on the population that maybe passes at an unconscious level. People don't recognize it, but at the back of their minds there's an awareness. And was it Eisenhower who talked about, was it Eisenhower talked about that
In his farewell speech.
farewell speech about there being a power so
The military-industrial complex.
Basically.
He first coined the term, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
behind the scenes that men who dare to speak of it do so in hushed tones type thing.
As I said, I could go on for now about JFK because the story of the developments in what has been released since then, from the Zapruder film being released, I think it was about 10 years afterwards, early 70s.
Zapruder?
Zapruder,
Yeah.
to the Zapruder film shocked people because that was the first time they saw, because the deep state government had decided to protect the people by not showing them
Right.
what they had. But then that was published. And so they were sort of re-terrorized, but shown it for the first time. But that also spawned a popular demand for something to be done at the same time. So we're terrorizing you, but it also brought them out to engage in conspiracy theories or thinking about what the hell just happened to our president, which spawned the House, the Church Committee, and then the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Right.
And some fairly deep diving into what only American intelligence agencies were getting up to at home and abroad.
And that didn't change anything either. That didn't cause any kind of like a restructuring or, as JFK wanted to do, to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. That didn't cause any blowback for the CIA, even though they delved into it and
Yeah.
and even then came up.
But
with,
do you know that is attributed to JFK because it
Well, he didn't
appeared
say it.
in New York Times? It's not clear that he said it.
It's not a direct quote.
Officially, he was shown the New York Times report, and it was actually first reported in an obscure Washington daily, not one of the big Washington papers, by someone going by a name like a pseudonym, based out, and he said he filed the report, report from Vietnam. Anyway, the New York Times carried it and published it as well. So that infamous quote is actually not clear because officially in the official records, I think maybe revealed by this Stone documentary. No, excuse me, no, it's an earlier revelation. Anyway, it's simply the White House notes from that day that President Kennedy was shocked when he saw that report.
claiming that he had said he
A
wanted to
month
shatter.
before that he would shatter this, and that he wasn't sure that, and something like that. If the report claimed that at the very highest levels of our government, the president, though the White House is unsure that they can control the CIA.
At the very highest levels of our government, that doesn't imply this, but in realistic terms, it doesn't. It doesn't
It
imply.
implied that it was the president leaking this
Yeah.
to Arthur Kroc. But first of all, Arthur Kroc for the New York Times never actually was. He wasn't the originator of it. It was someone else. It was never been tracked down. And
Probably
secondly,
someone in the CIA.
the other records contradicted, namely that JFK was shocked. It wasn't the workaround where he was trying to pass a hint on to the American people that
Yeah.
they're after me. Anyway, the
Would be
reason
a
why that's interesting is because it's one of a number of items that has been suggested since by, let's say, the fringe of the JFK research movement, that these are carefully planted things, either ahead of time or in the subsequent decades since, that subtly point to U.S. domestic CIA intelligence involvement in it, which is what. Okay, so then you say, why, if they have their policy in general is a wall against
A wall of
revealing,
silence.
would they themselves then do that? Well, the theory is there's a third party doing it.
Hmm.
That's not U.S. intelligence.
Yeah. Well, what do you call him? Bill? What do you call the comedian you like?
Bill Gates.
No, he's a comedian. Yeah, Bill Gates.
No,
not
Bill Gates. Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks. Yeah. I mean, he summed it up. I mean, I find it kind of interesting that there's this new documentary by Oliver Stone, 2 hours long. It's into all the details, exhaustive, and it's. I mean, you watch it, and the end of it is obviously the official story is complete and utter bullshit. Obviously, it was a conspiracy from within the deep state, within the U.S. to shoot and kill President Kennedy. But he summed it up. I mean, the only piece of information you really needed to just blow the whole thing open without knowing all the details was him and one of his sketches. And he talked about JFK. He just said, you look at that Zapruder film, and Oswald's behind him supposedly in the book depository, and Bill Hicks just goes, but you look at the Zapruder film and you see the president being shot, and it's like back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Exactly.
Back and to the left.
So
and it's like, so he shot from behind and his head went back and to the left.
So this is the fringe theory within...
End of debate, like.
Exactly. This is the fringe theory within the movement. It's so freaking obvious.
Yeah.
It's been so freaking obvious since the Zapruder film was published in the early 70s that there's something else going on here. Namely, there's a third party that, for some reason, the U.S. intelligence is forced to protect its role in it, because U.S. intelligence thought it was going to do one thing with JFK, specifically stage an assassination, not actually whack him, their own commander-in-chief. Because this is a sticking point, and this is why those people who cannot go there, they will often say this, look, come on, we're talking about, you're saying our own intelligence, those that generally tend to be our patriots. They work hard to protect our country. And you're saying that they went in a conspiracy with the other intel agencies, the FBI, etc., and the military and the Pentagon to kill the president. They might not have liked him, but that's too one conspiracy too far for me. And they have a point. What if there was one plan or idea to stage one, either to spook Kennedy and deceive him, or if he's too smart, nevertheless to leave him with holding something hot, a hot potato we had to deal with, namely, oh shit. So here it is. We just had a failed assassination attempt on
by the commies.
By the commies, and now I've got to do what we didn't do before in Bay of Pigs and actually go into Cuba.
Because of public opinion.
Yes.
You can whip up public opinion as a result of... But, Mr. President, the commies tried to kill you. Aren't you going to stand up for yourself? Are you a chicken? What are you going to do with these commies? So that was the plan.
That was the plan. And there was a double cross where someone came in and just switched in real bullets and real shooters and did it live.
Yeah, I've come across that.
That makes sense, because to us specifically, because we found a double cross, we think, in 9/11.
Yeah, the same. There's a pattern there, yeah. It's almost like nested patsies.
Exactly.
You've levels of patsies. You've got Oswald as the consummate patsy, obviously, at the front end. But then within that, people behind it who thought they were doing something with Oswald found out a bit too late that, oh, that's not what we were doing. We were doing something else. And now that there's something else has been dropped on me, I'm implicated.
And look how
somebody has leverage over me because I put myself in this position thinking I was part of a specific plan, with specific details, and that we were all on the same page, and that I would go here and do this and it would be covered. But now I realize that actually, now that it went live and it went beyond what I thought it was going to happen, I'm exposed.
Exactly.
And that person who exposed me, and I suddenly, with horror, look behind me and realize that the guy I thought was part of my team is kind of looking at me with a kind of wry grin on his face and saying, And
forever after, you have to defend him from that mob. Right. Otherwise, the mob, he has set it up, so that mob's going to come after you.
You're next in line if you don't play ball. And obviously, the big thing that we're not talking about here is that would, in one word, although it doesn't explain it, obviously, but Israel is the proposed
third party
mastermind or master planner behind that. And of course, when we say Israel, we don't necessarily mean Israel. We mean intel agencies associated with Israel. And we mean, I suppose, again, kind of levels within intel agencies. Yeah. It may not even be just Israel. It may be leveled within the intelligence agencies within the US. You've got overt, in the same way you've got an overt government in the US and in other countries, and then a kind of advisors or deep state or, deep state mandarins type thing or bureaucrats. In the same way, at the political level, you have that. You have that the same dynamic at the level of intel agencies, where you have overt intel agencies. You've got the overt director of intelligence. You've got the overt director of the CIA, director of the FBI, and beyond them, you've got people who are unknown, who pull their strings.
Yeah. And their mole in the American intelligence structure in that time,
Right.
their chief mole by far was James Jesus Angleton.
Right.
It was found out later, leaked to either the Church Committee or the House Select Committee on Assassinations, a memo that for the first time exposed the fact that there was a CIA agent in Dealey Plaza at the time, Howard Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that, the cheeky git, by sending a memo to the incoming, in the 70s, CIA director, Bissell, I think. Just a memo to let you know that this thing here where it shows that Howard Hunt is in Dealey Plaza on 22nd November 1963, we ought maybe to get an alibi for him. And Bissell was, holy shit, don't give me this, you know? So he buried it. Well, that got declassified in the 90s thanks to the fallout from the JFK movies. So Angleton himself, and Angleton is CIA counterintelligence. He's the guy who looks for spies in America. He's the one who goes around looking. He's basically the chief finder of moles in the system. And he was the key mole for Israeli Mossad.
Yeah.
They revered him so much. They have 2 freaking memorials to this guy in Israel.
Yeah, yeah.
For services above and beyond.
That kind of stuff's in plain sight as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A crude analogy would be someone plotting a crime that you're not really involved in, but you're kind of observing or whatever, or would be like someone with with the wherewithal to plan a crime, commit a crime, and they don't want to be found out, let's say, or they don't want the crime to proceed, and the investigation of the crime to proceed in a certain direction, and the police are a threat to them. So what they do is they find some way to implicate the police in the crime.
Yeah.
They say, and the police are investigating the crime. The detective who's investigating this crime and wants to pursue it in the normal way, he suddenly finds that in the evidence, his fingerprint is on the crime scene before he arrived. And he's like, and then he becomes party to the crime and has
invested
in covering
it up.
Yeah, it's not complicated to do. You just have to be quite a
Cunning,
nefarious and cunning kind of person to involve it. You have to have some kind of grand plan, power, control, some kind of addiction in that respect. So yeah, it's all very interesting, but it fries the brain of the average person. So, and we're not saying our listeners are the average people, but like I'm saying, there's no point in talking to any of your friends or family about these kind of things because you will fry their brains and they won't thank you for it.
Yeah. You'll end up a paranoid, gibbering idiot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you'll end up
we all end up with a little bit, on the way to...
If you push it too far, you'll end up with no friends or family. So you got to play a kind of game in that respect,
Okay, so we should let's deal with our big topic. Maybe we can do this in passing. But there's been a lot of protests. Yesterday, of course, Saturday, I think globally. I don't know how these things are coordinated, but there were a lot of protests yesterday against all things
COVID pass, vaccine pass.
COVID pass, vaccine pass, mandatory. That came up last week, didn't it? I mean, when we left, we did a show last week, and one of our main topics was, Jesus, Austria's gone and done the next step, a selective lockdown for those who are unvaccinated. Well, that only lasted 5 days, and they announced, actually, we're putting everyone in lockdown
All you vaccinated
as of tomorrow,
people.
Monday.
Yep.
Plus, by February 1st, everyone
in the entire country has to be vaccinated or they will be fined, i.e. they're criminalizing not taking the vaccine. Well, mandates, like, I can understand people protesting mandates because I'm against mandating anything. Am I? Maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe in something, well, yeah, I kind of am against mandating everything. That's just a personal position from mandating anything. I can understand how you can prescribe certain things, but mandating in terms of, it kind of like gets into Jordan Peterson's, the difference he makes between asking people or telling people they can't do something, actively do something, and there's a big difference between that and telling people that they have to do something.
Yeah.
They have to take some action or you will be punished. That I'm pretty much against that across the board. I mean, and it seems reasonable that everybody I would assume that everybody would be on board with that, but apparently not. Anyway, I'd say there's a lot of people out there who are quite happy with the idea of mandating medical procedures for the population, or you're going to jail.
There are too many people. But I look at these protests and I'm thinking, okay, so there were massive ones in Austria.
Yeah.
Of course, given that, they're currently front and center with this stuff. A big one in Switzerland, big ones in Germany, a big one in Croatia. 3 major ones in the UK, both England, Northern Ireland, Wales, not Wales, Scotland for sure. Big one again in Paris. They've been, every week in France. Mm-hmm. A massive one in Rome. Media said 3,000 far-right activists. That's how the AP opened with the report. It's not 3,000 people. I have a video here. It's easily tens of thousands. Big one in Brussels yesterday. The Czech Republic. 4 or 5 major cities had massive protests in Australia. Probably, like Austria, getting the worst of it right now. There was a big one in New York City. I imagine
surprisingly,
generally all, that hashtag resistance, basically those types of people, but they're definitely against. Their freedom button has been pinged more than their empathy button at this point. So there's an impressive turnout in New York City. Massive protests in Canada, New Zealand, smaller ones, but still Sweden, Norway, and a big one last night in Denmark.
And France, in Paris.
Yesterday
Paris, was the 3rd anniversary of the Yellow Vest. Beginning of the Yellow Vest movement, so they had a kind of a celebration, a birthday party of a 3-year anniversary, but obviously it was mixed in with the whole anti-COVID pass, anti-vaccine pass, and general.
But it's interesting that it hasn't reached the same ferocity as the Yellow Vest one yet.
No.
I say yet, I presume that's the trend, that's where it's going.
Yeah.
Speaking of ferocity, probably the ones we saw in the Netherlands Thursday, Friday were the most intense. They were riots, okay?
Friday and Saturday night, yeah.
Because they have a similar selective quality to the Austrian ones. They're going to lock down specific cities or regions in the Netherlands based on how cases are doing or whatever. Well, the people there went apeshit, especially in Rotterdam on Thursday. Now, the reports about that are 7 injured and that police fired warning shots. Implying that they were actual, live bullets.
Live rounds.
We've seen the video, and it sounds like live bullets. And then you see someone dropping. Was he hit? They say no one's dead, but maybe they're just media doesn't follow it up. We don't know. I don't know which. Do you want to watch any of these videos?
Put on the Rotterdam one. Yeah. Do you have the one where the guy drops? Because there's a video people, if we don't have it, people can look for it themselves. It's one of the common ones. The most popular ones of Rotterdam from the past couple of nights. It was Friday night that it happened. Just somebody taking a video, and there's fireworks going off or stuff, and you can see the police not too far away, and there's a guy just standing on a corner, and there's a gunshot, and he falls over, which is kind of scary when you think about it, that there's people in the streets of glorious Western democracies who are out protesting the government policy to force them to take a medication, and when they protest that, they get shot by the police. I mean, that image is just like, it conjures up the worst of totalitarian regimes.
Do this, really. Or you're shot.
Well, yeah, being shot in the street for protesting having to take a medication. I mean, it's a mix of totalitarian regimes of recent years in Africa or Asia or somewhere, plus throw in a bit of Nazi Germany for the forced medical procedures. I mean, it's bizarre. Anyway.
It's bizarre because there's only one place it goes if they follow it through. Yeah. Well, this is the kind of place where it might go. I'm not sure this video contains the scene in particular, but let's play it anyway. That's gunfire. Some of it.
Fireworks as well. But yeah, it was mad. Yeah, and the similar scenes last night, Saturday night, this weekend, you know.
Okay, the second link I sent you has shorter videos from Twitter. It's the one you sent me.
Yeah, Ryan in the chat there says that the Australian protests are very probably the largest ever seen in Australian history, even bigger than the Iraq War protests in 2003. And Bahar says 3 people with bullet wounds. That's in Rotterdam.
Yeah, but it was intense. As someone else points out, there were also wounded among the police. So I mean that's why I say I referred back to the beginning of the Elevest, because the 1st December 2018 was mayhem on the streets in Paris. So that's similar to what we saw in the Netherlands just a couple of nights ago.
Except there's no police firing live rounds, if that's proven.
Right. I doubt they'll be confessing to that anytime soon. But that might, okay, so on the one hand, like you suggested, oh God, we're going totalitarian here, but it might be a sign of the kind of desperation that they felt they were in right there on the streets. You know, police, yeah.
Yeah, but still, firing live rounds is like, there's no going back from that. Like,
yeah.
I mean, certainly there's a lot you can do before
I'm
you start
not
shooting
I'm
people
not
in the street.
defending
Like,
it. I'm not.
I mean, you go away, you walk away. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of people lighting fires in the streets. You don't try shooting them.
No,
Like,
I think that they were government buildings in Rotterdam.
well,
They were like, probably the pressure they're under to like get rid of these people.
Yeah.
Probably intense. I think this video, yes, play that one, Scotty, the first one.
Jesus Christus. Holy fuck!
Firework.
Achterwaarts!
Okay, maybe not. Scroll down again. Not that one, I don't think. This one here, I think.
maybe. Next one.
No, it's not. Not that one.
There's no more. That's it.
Yeah.
This is
that's
the one
one.
where the guy shot. See, look at the other side of the street, the corner there. Just play it. Okay.
Hands up, don't shoot.
Boom.
And he's...
They sound like gunshots right there.
Ja, hij is Yusuf, genau.
Hij is Yusuf, man. Yusuf. Er is iemand geschoten.
Okay, as opposed to if they're discharging a rubber bullet, it would be a lot less sharp, right?
Well, maybe not. But I mean, the fact that he fell over and the way that he fell over,
Yeah.
I mean, you see the distance to the police. I don't know. It depends. It's hard to say. But as Bahar said, and I think Bahar is on the scene there, so she'd be reading Dutch news reports and stuff like that. Sorry for doxing you there, Bahar. She says that there were 3 people with gunshot wounds. So,
Right, in hospitals. Okay.
although again, the police could say, "Well, we weren't firing live bullets. It was protesters, some people there with guns and stuff." So it remains to be seen. But again, like so many other things, what happens is that a year later or 2 years later, the truth leaks out when everybody's forgotten about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, except the rate things are snowballing.
Yeah.
It could be common. It could be common
Yeah. It won't
sight. You know.
Right.
The Ryan in the chat room mentioned Australia. Yeah, they were nuts. So I think official figures, but a decent estimate for one of them in Melbourne, a city of 5 million people, is about 500,000 people
Right.
on the streets.
So,
Similarly,
10%
in
of the
proportion
population.
to the rest of the countries, similar numbers.
well, you can
almost.
see how you get much greater numbers. Like that would be 10% of the city of Melbourne out in the streets, which is a lot. Like 10%.
And
of
then you
any
multiply
city.
it by 10 for others who feel the same way.
Right. But people who, which means everybody, but well, it could be most people, because at this point, the governments have kind of like crossed the line where they're no longer making much of a distinction between people who have done their duty, done their civic duty and got vaccinated. They're saying, sorry, you're in the same position as people who are unvaccinated. We're throwing you all in together. Everybody's locked down. Everybody has to wear a mask. Everybody has to show their passes, blah, blah, blah. So there's not much benefit to unvaccinated people right now, or sorry, to vaccinated people now compared to unvaccinated people. So you can see how vaccinated people will be getting a bit pissed off at this point. Like, you know, even the ones who said, yeah, well, you know, we'll be happy with unvaccinated people being locked down. The point is, lock down the unvaccinated people, not us. If you lock us down, what was the point of us doing our civic duty?
That's what I said to you. Like, sooner or later, the trade-off has to come. There has to be something tangible they get for what they've done.
Yeah.
We've done our bit. So where is it? Give it to us, you know?
Yeah, But just on the COVID thing, stick up.
Well,
Go ahead. Have you got something else to do before you go on?
yeah,
That?
just briefly on increasing lockdown measures. I mean, it's in the air. No, it's on. Excuse me, it's on paper. It's in print. It sounds like Germany will follow suit.
Some parts of it so far, anyway. But we'll see. The thing is, you have to remember about all these things. And the Austrian chancellor said it explicitly. Said my intention here, or my goal here is very clear: is to get people to get vaccinated. So all of these threats, they are threats that they're making throughout the entire pandemic, have not been followed up on. Essentially, there's been an awful lot of compliance among the population, but the threats of if you don't, or you're not allowed to go here, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do whatever, they haven't really manifested in practical reality, where the people who had a bit of sense and went, well, I'll just take that on as some advice from the government and I'll go ahead and do it anyway, they find that they can do it, and that's everything from going places, air travel, different kinds of traveling to different places and going into different places. They're very easy to circumvent. There hasn't been a lot of actual policing of it because government understood that people were policing it themselves.
Yeah.
There's a point there in several countries last year at the beginning, after a couple of months, that several governments had to get out and actively and in a very concerned tone advise people to go to hospital if you're having chest pains, for example.
Right.
So they almost got freaked out by the extent of the
Extreme
compliance.
Yeah. To the point of self-harm.
So they realize that people are extremely compliant at this point, or have been anyway, and they're following through. Whether they'll continue to be compliant is another story, but for now, the Austrian Chancellor and obviously other governments are following suit, where they're continuing to throw out these threats to people's civil liberties in order simply to get them to get vaccinated. They don't mean necessarily that they're going to actually follow through on them, or that even if they pass a ruling that says not allowed to go here, if you actually try and go there, you find you can go there. You know what I mean? So you have to take that with a grain of salt. Essentially, those claims, because they are explicitly designed to be
deterrents to nudge people.
Threats to encourage people to
behavioral encouragement
to get vaccines.
Okay, we're still.
So we'll wait and see. But so far, I don't think, people are already suffering from the general atmosphere of, a kind of depressed atmosphere, fear and loathing type thing going around, and people just aren't having a good time. Certainly, they're not having as good a time in their general average everyday lives as they were pre-pandemic, in the before times, as CNN so aptly called them, the before times. People are not as happy in general. There's a general aura of fear and loathing and depression over many countries, and I think that's what's motivating a lot of the protests, as well as the various little strictures that are actually being placed on people. Like, if you think about us here or people we know in other countries, they're not really restricted from anything compared to, practical terms.
Yeah.
There's very little actual restrictions. So what is it that's pissing people off, or what is it that's causing people to feel on edge, antsy? And that's what I think is provoking a lot of the protests. It's just this a kind of an anxiety that has been injected into the atmosphere over the past 18 months that is causing people to feel discontented, disgruntled. They're all turning into disgruntled citizens. Remember, that was the term for disgruntled citizens was included in the US, what do you call it?
The DHS terror threat
Department of Homeland Security. That a potential terror threat in post 9/11 was just general disgruntled citizens who might
citizens disgruntled with
whatever.
COVID pandemic measures.
For sure, yeah.
That was cited. Yeah.
But any disgruntled citizen is a threat to the government, whatever he's disgruntled about.
Naturally,
you're not allowed to be disgruntled, because the government does everything right all the time. So do we want to talk a little bit about? I've got a few details here on interesting one from the UK's Office of National Statistics. It's called. It's got a photo deaths. This is from, as I said, the Office of National Statistics. It's the UK Office of National Statistics, and they produce this data on COVID deaths. And this is from, as you see, March this year until September, so 6 months. And the brown line, it's death rates. Basically, you've got on the left-hand side, you've got from 0 to 3.5 per 100,000 people. So how many people are dying from all causes over the last 6 months? And these are the numbers per 100,000 people. So it's not very many, like 3.5 per 100,000 people dying from all causes. But it's separated in the two lines between vaccinated and unvaccinated, the brown line being vaccinated, the blue line being unvaccinated. So basically for the past 6 months, for most of the past 6 months, let's say since April there, from the near the start of the graph on the left, from April to September this year, vaccinated people have been dying at twice the rate.
That's crazy. But that's the whole argument at the moment is that get the jab to save your life.
Well, we'll put up the link to the actual ONS website where this is pulled from an Excel graph where you can see all the numbers through. So they go through every week and they show the numbers between vaccinated and unvaccinated. I didn't do this graph, but someone else did it. But I checked all the figures, and they
Okay.
on the graph.
So
and
this
they
graph isn't
matched.
being shown anywhere, but that is indeed what they
It's in the
would
form
look
of an
like.
Excel spreadsheet with
Got it.
actual numbers, and
Okay.
these numbers have just been tabulated or calculated from that graph. But I checked it, and they are twice excess deaths from all causes among vaccinated, or twice those among the unvaccinated over the past 5 months, let's say.
Yeah, at
Sorry,
the
not
point
the
of
past
inf-
5 months, but
the
from
point of
April,
inflection
from April,
there, early April, yeah.
yeah, from April to September, towards the end of September this year,
Wow.
twice as much.
Because that's the last leg it's standing on the whole argument.
Yeah.
Get your shot because it reduces severe cases, hospitalizations, and death.
Well, I mean, there's obviously something to be discussed about this in terms of this is all deaths, right? This isn't COVID deaths. This is all cause
Fine, okay.
cause mortality, right? So you could say, well, is there some other reasons that are causing? But again, it's
But
separated
the
here
only
by vaccinated,
distinguishing
right,
factor
it's
between the brown
vaccination,
line and the
right.
blue line
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
I mean,
vaccinated and unvaccinated. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to argue with it. I always try to argue against my own conclusion when I look at something and think, "Oh my God, that's a slam dunk. It's busted wide open type thing." And
you
then I
do,
go, hang
Joe.
on. And I go, hang on a minute.
No one does that.
There's
You
got to
should
be
like, hey, YouTubers.
I'm like, there's something I've got to be missing here. This
can't be that
It can't be
simple.
as clear cut.
No doubt.
And I try to, that's why I was just saying maybe there's some other reason that would cause vaccinated people to be dying at twice the rate. Now again, the reason this can be overlooked is because you think twice the rate, that's a lot. That's like 100% more or whatever. But look at the numbers on the left. It's up to 2.8, down to 2.7, 2.6 per 100,000 people.
Per 100,000. There's still something at the margins.
Yeah, of course. So
So
it can
to
be
speak.
overlooked. So
Yeah.
it can be passed off as just normal deaths.
Or can be
You don't have to look at it.
accidentally fudged.
Right.
But depending on how you splice the data.
Yeah, or government statisticians can just look at it and say, well, it's not a big deal. They're just people die every year. And this is in the UK, for example, 60,000 people die every month, roughly, of every year, every month. So 600,000, 500,000, 600,000 people die every year in the UK of all causes. This is just some of those. What's your point? But then if that's the tack you're going to take, then can't we use the same approach to COVID deaths? Couldn't we have used the same approach?
This
to
is the
COVID
problem. They won't pick a baseline, right? A standard.
not
It
fair.
keeps shifting depending
It's
on
not
how you're
fair.
looking at it.
Equal opportunity.
So what's next?
So so that's just an interesting data. But then I just pulled. There's also what's the other? Well, let's look at drugs. Drugs that PNG. This is also from. This has been put together from the vigiaccess.org. You can go to vigiaccess.org and look at each of these drugs, and it was because VigiAccess and the World Health Organization have a kind of or cooperate with each other, whatever. It just shows the number of adverse reactions to various drugs that have been used for quite a long time. and the years during which those drugs have been used. Now, for most of them, you see it's all back in the late 60s, 70s, when they were first used, and the total adverse reactions that were recorded for those drugs. So from the top is the lowest, right down to the bottom is the highest number of adverse reactions to a specific drug. Obviously, the highest in this list is, and I think there aren't really any other drugs that would figure. These are the ones that have the most adverse reactions, and the highest is COVID-19 vaccines by a factor of 10 compared to the next highest, which is flu vaccine. And this is worldwide. So, and of course, flu vaccines have been given since 1968. So if you imagine how many people, we worked out something about 100 million people in recent years get the flu vaccine in the US.
Annually, yeah.
Yeah, annually. So, I mean, of course, that's increased over the years. So you can say 100 million every year going back to 1968. But you're still talking about probably several billion, or at least cumulatively over those years, of vaccine doses given. And there have only been 272,000 adverse reactions in that entire period of time. So very low, very low risk in terms of adverse reaction for influenza vaccines. But COVID-19 vaccines in just the past 9-10 months since it was released are 10 times the amount, a bit less than 10 times the amount of adverse reactions in just 1 year compared to... And of course, then you have to wonder, well, how many people were taking the COVID vaccine? Well, according to our World in data, it's about half the world, 53% of the world's population. So you're talking about 4 billion people or so. So 4 billion people. So you could actually say it's equivalent in a certain sense. Maybe you could estimate roughly that the number of people who have had the COVID vaccine in the past year, since it came out, is equivalent to the number of people in
the last 3 decades
who have had the
some kind of flu shot.
The flu shot in the last 3 or 4 decades, or since 1968. And so those numbers then would kind of fit if the number of vaccines of both those kinds given, the difference between those two numbers, which is about 10 times more adverse reactions for COVID vaccine, would probably hold true, roughly speaking. Which is interesting because, and I was trying to do all the numbers, right? I'm sitting there trying to figure out all the numbers, and then I just say, I wonder if there's anybody actually else reporting this, and just go to the CNBC article, Scotty, because then I finally went, you know what? These numbers are frying my brain. I've kind of come up with the 10 times.
Yeah.
Flu to
Good
COVID
job.
vaccine adverse reactions, and then I see the CDC has already done this for me.
What
they
day
say
is that?
there's
That's from January this year.
Yeah, 10 severe allergic reactions to the COVID vaccine runs 10 times compared to flu shot, but they're still rare. As long as you always say it's rare, then you can say whatever you want.
And they knew that already in January. That's nuts.
Well, they've done their tests and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Their trials. I mean, and then by January they had a month or so of actually rolling it out in the population. So.
Yeah, but hang on. Severe allergic reactions is one thing. Freaking myocarditis is
Well,
another.
that's a severe allergic reaction. I mean, that term, severe allergic reaction, means that, your body is reacting in a
severe way. Okay.
severe way to the vaccine. But
most people associate an allergy with chew. Okay, I'm better now.
yeah. So my point here in just bringing this up is that this is a reason, and it's backed up by the CDC, why anybody who feels that they're healthy and has a strong immune system does not need to justify saying that they don't want to get the vaccine. Because if you do the numbers, I mean, you could pull the numbers together yourself, and you could show that actually, well, if the risk of an allergic reaction to the COVID vaccine is 10 times that of the flu, then that's quite high. And based on my rough calculation of numbers, my chances of having a severe allergic reaction or a bad reaction or a problem with COVID-19 infection is lower than the chances of getting a severe reaction to the vaccine. Therefore, I'm not getting the vaccine.
Yeah, this is exactly what all these so-called anti-vaxxers have been doing.
Right, so
a basic risk analysis, and they're
course.
going, I don't want to take it.
Right, and it's
the
totally
government
justified.
goes, you have to take it.
I know, but it's totally, the government's position in that respect is totally unjustified, even by their own, following the logic and just being reasonable about it. How could anybody disagree with you that when you present official data, even from the CDC, that it's quite risky compared to other vaccines? And, when someone says, well, you got the flu vaccine, why don't you take the COVID vaccine? Well, because it's 10 times riskier. and I don't feel that I'm at risk from COVID, from any severe problems with COVID. Therefore, I don't want the vaccine. Okay, can you go away now? What else is there to say? Well, there's more to say, yeah, because you not being vaccinated means that you're driving variants and mutations of the existing vaccine or existing virus, and you're continuing the whole pandemic for everybody, and you're continuing you're giving governments reason to continue lockdowns and putting pressure on the
Health service.
and blah, 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 blah. But if you just go to the CNN article, again, this is publicly available information, and this in CNN is only a dodgily distilled version of the actual studies that have been done. Vaccination is not enough. We'll just go down to the first paragraph, is pretty much all you need to know. Vaccination alone won't stop the rise of new variants, and in fact could push the evolution of strains that evade their protection, researchers warned Friday. So that argument that unvaccinated people are, encouraging or driving mutation of existing SARS-CoV-2 strains is not true, and it's also, this is something that they don't really know very much about. This is new. These mRNA vaccines in particular are brand new. They've never been rolled out to so many people at once. They've never really done it during, so broadly and so massively among so many people during a new virus, and they themselves throw in the idea that it's a lab manufactured virus, and it makes it even more complicated. They really don't know. And if you just go to the RT article, an example of how they don't really know what they're talking about, and any scientist worth his salt would admit that, yeah, we can't say what's driving mutations, and we don't really know. In Japan, scholars, they don't really explain the mysterious disappearance of Delta variant in Japan. If you just go, I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8th paragraph. We were literally shocked to see the findings, the researcher told the Japan Times. So here you have virologists, epidemiologists being literally shocked to find that in one particular country of something like, 130 million people, the Delta variant just went poof and went away. It went away. So they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
None of them can claim that they really know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to mutations and strains and variants and all that kind of stuff. And they can't claim that unvaccinated people are the ones who are driving it. In fact, standard virology, the most common, the basic understanding of mutations, the one that you hear the most of, and that is more standard in terms of that discipline and its understanding of viruses, is that it's vaccination that very often, or has been known in the past, to drive mutations. Not it's simply the virus, entering into someone who's unvaccinated. Because if you're a healthy person and you're unvaccinated, your immune system pretty much takes care of the virus.
And that's a scenario that guy, the Dutch guy Geert van den Bosch, warned about.
I'll just give you the basic idea. The basic idea is that when you vaccinate someone, you're vaccinating them, especially with an mRNA vaccine, you're vaccinating them with a very targeted vaccine that's, in this case, targeted against, it's not even a vaccine, it's gene therapy, right? Anyway, it's targeted against narrowly targeted against one particular protein of a virus. And the antibodies that it produces or whatever, in the process of stimulating an immune response in that very targeted way, if that person, during that period of the first shot, when they first get immunized and your immune system starts to figure out, starts to activate based on the instructions of the mRNA vaccine or mRNA gene therapy, if the virus comes along and is in your body at that time, the way they describe it is it actually gives it a kind of heads up look at what kind of immune response. They almost describe it in an intelligent way, that the virus gets a advanced notice after that first shot. As it sees your immune system start to develop immunity, it gets a preview of what kind of immunity you're building up to defend against this virus, and the virus can then look at that, quote unquote, and mutate in a way that avoids it. So it's actually the process of vaccination that is most likely to produce mutant strains or mutations that might evade vaccination.
Yeah.
So again, that's an open debate. It's very complex. They don't know a lot about it because it's all novel, both the virus because it was made in a lab, and also the rollout of this gene therapy / pseudo vaccination on billions of people. So they don't really know what they're doing, and there's no one can claim that unvaccinated people are driving mutations and continuing the pandemic and continuing lockdowns. If you're healthy, your risk from COVID is extremely low. If you're healthy, your risk from the vaccination is 10 times the risk from a flu vaccine. It's a no-brainer, unless you've been terrified into believing that you're going to drop dead as soon as the virus comes within 10 feet of you, you know. So, yeah, and I'll just throw up these to make one point basically about them. We talked last week about vaccine deaths, right? I mean, there seems to have been a lot of other than what we've just shown about adverse reaction. There's been a lot of actual deaths. Throw up the MSN.com one. It's kind of funny. It's from Kuala Lumpur, from Malaysia. The Health Ministry's Senior Principal Assistant Director, Dr. Kai Ko Miao, died on the 17th of November. 17th of November. He died on the 17th of November. He completed his COVID-19 booster dose on November 9th. Did not report any extraordinary side effects. He was also present for duty as usual on November 17th, and then on November 16th, and then on November 17th he dropped dead. But the Health Ministry official has said, please don't speculate about whether or not the vaccine could have killed him, or that he may have had a very severe allergic reaction to the mRNA vaccines. That's the kind of thing that's been happening a lot, and it's
Please don't state the obvious.
Yeah,
you know, just shut up and take a vaccine, like him.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's not exactly appealing, is it?
No, and these reports are fairly rare. I mean, it tends to be in countries like Malaysia, and we had one last week from some other Asian country and stuff.
No, because in the West they're smarter. They
know.
go, died after short illness.
Yeah, look up died after short illness on Google. Anyway, so yeah,
there's
that, and there's just a few more graphs I just want to throw up just to make one point. It's all the deaths one. Deaths, no, sorry, not deaths, Scotty. Just the country names. Yeah. So this is what's that one called? That one's called USA. So this is just USA, and this is from our World in Data. If you go to our World in Data, you can look at all these yourself. There's different parameters you can throw in to see our World in Data /COVID, or just our World in Data COVID. Do a search for it, and it'll bring up the website with all these graphs and stuff that you can select different parameters. This is vaccine doses and confirmed deaths, just side by side. This is for the USA. So vaccine doses per 100,000. Or no, sorry, per 100 people. Let's see, it was rolled out, obviously, what's that, like December? Yeah, December 2020, up until today, vaccine doses going way up there. Down below, I mean, on the one hand, you could look at it and you say, hang on a minute. So as the vaccines rolled out and they get increased, but then you have this spike on the right-hand side in deaths. As the vaccine numbers were increasing on the bottom, you have an increase in deaths. But then you'd have to get into, well, who are those deaths among? Are they among vaccinated or unvaccinated? I don't know. It doesn't give you that. But that's not my point here. I think there's two things going on here, basically. And I'll show you in a minute, because maybe you'll notice the difference. It's the bottom half of these graphs that I want you to look at. So you look at the bottom half of that one, then go on to the next one. Is the UK. And just look at the months. Bottom half of the graph, look at the months and the graph shape. Go on to the next one. This is for Europe. Look at the bottom half of the graph. Look at the months. Look at the shape of the graph. I think we've got a France one as well, do we? Bottom half of the graph. Shape. Months. Basically, what you're seeing is normal seasonality of a normal respiratory virus. And the numbers aren't that significant in terms of deaths. You have, in different countries, you have marginal or small percentage increase in excess deaths. We talked last week about in France how they put out a report about hospital activity in 2020, and that 2% of hospital admissions were COVID admissions in 2020 during this
Yeah.
horrible, terrible, deadly pandemic. 2% of all admissions to hospital were COVID admissions, but we were told that the hospitals were collapsing almost literally from the weight of patients. And that's true across the world, basically. It was put out that hospitals were in dire straits. The health service was in dire straits. It was about to collapse. But then you look at the actual data across the board, and it was all extremely low in terms of hospital admissions for COVID. So anyway, those graphs show two separate things. One, the seasonality of a normal seasonality of a respiratory virus,
Yeah.
where it peaks, it goes up in the winter, people succumb to it. The other thing is, if you look at all of those countries, all Western countries, you see that prior to 2020, if you look at the graphs for on our World in Data, you look at graphs for excess deaths on their own, you see that before the graphs start, and they go back a little bit into 2019, all of them were well below. Some of them, in the case of Germany, they had minus 10% average over 5 years or whatever, minus 10% excess deaths. So that 10% less than normal
Yeah.
deaths. And then within a few months, you have this spike up to about 10 or 15% excess deaths in April and May last year. But you have to subtract the minus 10%, because that's what they do every year. And this is the term that I've used before, that the statisticians call dry tinder. They see that when they have very low excess deaths in a winter season, when normally they would expect a lot of people to die, particularly older people, die from various circulating respiratory viruses.
Sometimes you can have a run of good years.
Yeah,
in
if that
quotes.
circulation is very low of those viruses, you will have very low deaths. You won't have the expected or average over the previous number of years. You'll have very low in this particular winter because there's low circulation of viruses. But they absolutely expect that either within the next few months, as if viruses come back online or come back into circulation in March and April, you'll have a big spike, or the following winter you'll have a big spike, and they don't care, because it's the normal ebb and flow of life. If you have much reduced deaths one particular winter, you're going to have an increase the next winter. They call it dry tinder, i.e. those people are ready to go off. There are people who would have died, who basically, literally, not literally, figuratively, had one foot in the grave. They don't have very long to live. Something's going to come along, most likely, or in a lot of cases, a respiratory illness puts them over the edge, because a lot of them have serious comorbidities. And it's always been that way. So you have to look, when you look at these spikes in April and May last year, you have to look at what was happening beforehand. And I noticed it's interesting, all of them, like you look through almost every single European country and the USA, they're all well below the 0 mark for the previous winter, like September, October, November, December of 2019. Very, very low excess deaths, i.e. a lot of dry tinder to spark off in April and May the following year. And then after that, you have this seasonality where this virus just becomes part of the circulating, one of the several circulating viruses.
Can I?
And then, but the other thing is that, so there's two separate things. So there's that just happening, and then while that's happening, you have this other graph that the top part of that graph, those graphs that I was showing you, showing this massive vaccination campaign. And they're separate, that's why I wasn't drawing a comparison between the spike in deaths in the last few months, like say September, October, November, and into December. You have this currently this increase in deaths that they're ascribing to COVID as vaccination is peaking. It's like, well, is that vaccination causing that? Like, maybe, but not necessarily, because the most important thing in the graph below is the normal seasonality, where respiratory virus deaths like COVID spike in the wintertime.
So for now, you would hold off on suggesting, as others who follow the numbers. I'm thinking of Alex Berenson, for example, ex-NYT journalist, who's writing, daily updates saying, holy shit, people, in every country I'm looking at, excess deaths are up in this year.
Again, that's separate, right? Because that will be a separate graph, because I looked at that small graph that showed the twice in the UK, double the excess deaths compared to between vaccinated and unvaccinated. But that's separate from those graphs I was just showing, which is COVID deaths compared to vaccinations. You know what I mean? So that would be separate. You could look, I would say, like, you look at COVID deaths and don't correlate COVID deaths because they're spiking now with the increase in vaccinations, and say, well, are those vaccinations causing COVID deaths? No, I would you'd have to do a graph between the timeline of vaccination rollout and those figures of excess deaths, and then try and compare those, because, put it this way, anybody who is dying or having severe reactions or possibly dying as a result of vaccination, they're not dying from COVID. They're not being put down as COVID deaths. They won't be recorded as COVID deaths. They'll just be lumped in with excess deaths.
Yeah.
So don't try and compare vaccinations with the graphs on COVID deaths, because it's apples and oranges, right? There's no correlation between the two because they're not recorded as such. If you want to look it up, look up excess deaths. But again, excess deaths usually aren't published until past the end of the year, for the previous year, So again, there's a lag in all of this, and it's hard to. But again, we can look at 2020, but that was before vaccinations. Depending on the country, excess deaths were marginal or within tolerances, let's say. And again, factoring in the fact that there were much less significantly below average excess deaths for the previous 5 years at the end of 2019. The point is you have to average it all out, and you got to look at it broadly. If anybody, and the media wants you to just focus on like.
Well, at the moment, they're turning out chart after chart after chart showing whatever baseline they're using, they're showing, and they're including last year in these charts. It's like a giant hockey stick. Right now, at the end of the chart, it's like, holy, look at these cases. And over here, you see the little camel hump that represents the hysteria we had last year in April, March.
Right, so it's way worse this year than last year.
That's what they're suggesting. And that's why we need to lock down again, and we need to get everyone vaxxed.
Well, extra double plus
by
good
the
vaccination.
standard, have the standards changed? Are they still using roughly the same standard for what is a COVID case?
They're just keeping it going. Like we said, I'd said this, like I was saying it multiple times on Facebook and stuff. Over the course of last year, pretty much from the beginning, when it was clear what they were doing, I said they're not going to let go of this. They're not letting go of this. Governments will not, unless something really happens to force them to let go, or something comes along that just makes COVID pale in comparison to it. They're not letting go of the power and control and authority, extra authority that the so-called pandemic has gifted to governments. They're not going to let go of it, so they're going to keep it going. They're going to have every reason, them and epidemiologists, just from the terms of job justification and media time, they're all invested in this being a thing that keeps going, even though it's not really keeping going, and it was never something that really should have been made much of an issue of. They're going to keep it going. So don't expect anybody to see any sense, and they will. And, you've got it across the board. Like, what are the three main components in this? Government, scientists, not science, because there's no such thing as science, even though they talk about the science. There's no such thing as science, because all science that you hear of is filtered through human beings who are fallible and corruptible. So you've got government, science, and media. They're the three people who created this in a certain sense and are continuing it by getting the people involved in it, and all three of them have clear vested interests in keeping it going. Government because of power and control and authority, scientists for notoriety, for job justification, for some airtime, for grants, and the media for money. Because the media is being given shitloads of money by government, for government. I saw it on the UK Independent the other day. I was reading an article. It was about COVID and vaccinations and stuff, and it's had down the bottom that this was sponsored by the UK government. The government had funded a shitload of money for the Independent to put out that article. I'm not doing it on an article by article basis. They've been giving just a lump sums of money to all media institutions.
Someone ran an analysis of British media companies. Something like 90% of the revenue now is from the government.
Yeah. So it's all biased.
So it's the government scientist media complex.
Yeah, pretty much.
Of our time. Well, speaking of them not having a clue what they're talking about, but certainly wanting to give that impression otherwise, this is part of the reason why you can have scholars in Japan be, quote, literally shocked when they just, I don't know, I don't know who they are. Maybe I was going to suggest when they do some real research, but maybe it's more that when they go beyond the confines of what they're told to or unconsciously know they should stay within. So this is Scott Atlas. Scott Atlas is a medical doctor, an MD.
Right.
He was appointed by President Trump in 2020 to
Mm-hmm.
join the coronavirus something action response team, whatever, for the White House. So he was working with Fauci, that
The
female
task force meeting. And
woman, I can't remember
I'm
her name.
listening.
So he spoke recently to Tucker Carlson. This is his, in 2 minutes, experience of what it was like working with Fauci.
In mid-August, I went to the task force meeting. And I'm listening to these people talk, and I was stunned. I was stunned at the lack of knowledge, at the complete lack of knowing the data, at the lack of critical thinking. Fauci, Birx, Redfield. My first meeting, the vice president turns to me and said, well, does everyone agree? And I'm sort of reluctant to speak up. And he sees my face and he says, well, Scott, you're here for a reason. I asked you to come here to say your opinion. If you disagree, say it. And I said, okay, I totally disagree. And then I went through the data. And in fact, I was the only one who had scientific papers in the task force meeting. I walked around the White House my entire time, and every task force meeting I went to, with a dozen, 24 papers, all the new data. And I would go through the scientific papers whenever I spoke. And whenever I spoke about an issue, whether it was the schools opening, the risk to children, the immunity, no one there, none of these medical people offered any data to rebut it. None of them, not one. They never had any scientific paper to rebut it. They would just say, I'm an outlier.
So they would go after you personally?
It was all personally. They were a unit. Birx, Fauci, and Redfield. In fact, Dr. Birx said in, say, January, February of this year that, I didn't know this at the time, she had an unwritten sort of contract agreement with Fauci and Redfield that if one of them got fired, they would all fire. So I thought Dr. Fauci, he knew the material from the emails that he wrote to his friends from February, March, about what was said during the meetings, revealed by not just Dr. Fauci, by all the medical people in the task force, a lack of knowledge about the data. They never cited a scientific study. I was talking almost every single day to some of the world's best epidemiologists about the data on an ongoing basis. These people, there was never any indication that they knew the papers, cited a paper, or even criticized a paper, not one. I've never worked with people at this level in my career as I did in that task force, and I'm not saying at a high level. Okay, I'm saying at a low level. I'm not sure these people could have been assistant professors where I worked. I mean, there was a lack of critical thinking, a lack of preparation. No one cited data but me.
So there you go.
Well,
that's his experience working with the people who tell you to, quote, follow the science and follow the data. They themselves do not follow the freaking data.
They don't care about it. They're not interested in it because that's not what it's about. It's about control and about power and
One's position.
influence over other people. And that's, I mean, again, it's all filtered through fallible human beings. And in this case, we're talking about the kind of worst of the worst of the lot in a certain sense, the most corruptible, the most corrupt, the most
People who
corrupted.
didn't earn their positions because of their merit. They're not the
Right.
best of us
No.
in their field.
No. And they're not going to let it go. They have a vested interest in a personal vested interest in keeping it going because it's about power and control. That's the bottom line. And until people accept that, they're not going to see what's going on. But it's the most logical, rational, and the most logical, rational explanation for it that also maps to reality, that explains all the questions people have. I hear people out there all the time going, what's going on? I just don't understand. It's very confusing and stuff. But they just leave it at that.
Yeah.
You can't solve it. You can't solve this problem, this conundrum, this apparent conundrum. You can figure this one out. You just have to be willing to accept some hard truths. But there's an awful lot of people who want the comfortable lie instead of the hard truth. So be it. You make your choice. Anyway, will we leave it there? Or
It's
do you
time.
have some pressing...
I
breaking
really wanted
news?
to play that Australian TV report about the unvaxxed, the Christmas.
Well,
But
it's a
it
good
is
thing.
getting
It's
late.
coming up to Christmas, so how long is it?
I don't remember.
It's a month till Christmas now, so maybe it'll be instructional for people to just get an idea of how they can navigate the difficult...
The difficult choices you're going to have to face this Christmas,
Yeah.
people. But fear not, because the media, which is the key part of that trifecta we're talking about, they have some answers. So you just follow them, do what they suggest, and everything will be fine. if you pull it up there, Scotty, we'll see how long it is. Maybe there's a time on it.
Coaches,
2 minutes. Ah, Jesus. Oh, let's start. Okay.
many of us will be faced
glorious.
with a new dilemma. How to handle unvaccinated loved ones and whether you should spend time with them over the festive season, sit next to them at Christmas dinner.
So how do you find out who is vaccinated, and how do you decide
Interrogate
to
them.
invite them over for Christmas lunch? We've got the tips and the tricks to help you avoid awkward encounters.
They say you can't
awesome.
choose your family, and it's never more relevant than at Christmas. Apart from the glazed ham and stuffed turkey, there'll also be an elephant in many dining rooms this festive season.
Delicious
the
elephant.
vaccination status of your nearest and dearest.
I'd invite them.
sure
They
you
probably
make
need to
them
get a negative test though.
I don't mind, actually. So I'm fully vaccinated, so it's fine.
Wrong answer.
But probably not.
Now the COVID-19
Probably not.
vaccine
Thanks
is
for
widely
suggesting it.
available across the country, and Australia is reopening. This year, we're all facing a very unique predicament.
These conversations about whether somebody is vaccinated or not can be challenging because it is a personal question.
The past 2 years has already been divisive enough, so it's never been more important to engage in peaceful and respectful conversations with your loved ones about their vaccine status before you invite them to your house or
Before.
other social events this Christmas.
After you've
Ideally
checked
in
the
a-
public health orders for where you live, you need to weigh up the risk.
Public health
Everybody's
order.
welcome. Come one, come all, the doors are open. Or you can decide to say, we
Or
love
screw you.
However, this year we're deciding to err on the side
However,
of
this year you're-
caution, and only vaccinated people are coming for
You're
Christmas.
a filthy unvaxxer.
And as top tips are, be upfront. Having the conversation early and directly is paramount. You can
Yes.
blame the health advice for not having unvaccinated guests over, or move the
Good.
celebrations to a venue. Then you're guided by their rules.
Like the bottom of a
Alternatively,
swimming pool.
consider having a celebration outdoors where the risk is less.
The government
Well,
is
it's nice
making
and cold.
decisions for the broader population, but it's up to us to make decisions for what's safe and right for our families.
Yeah. The government's making decisions for all of us.
That's how you
But we will
normalise
make
it.
our own sovereign decisions. No, you won't. You'll just say whatever the government says.
That's how you normalise the division in society.
Yeah.
the division
the,
of
the
society.
tones
Yeah.
and
It's all great. Just have a conversation about it and say, well, you know, I'm going to disown you because you're unvaccinated. You know, at one of the most important times in the year when families kind of get together who possibly haven't seen each other for a long time, I'm going to make the decision this year, because you're unvaccinated, to not invite you and maybe cause a permanent rift in our family. But I'm doing it with a smile on my face.
And it's because I
it's
love you.
And it's because I love you, and it's because I have no fucking clue what I'm talking about, and I'm just listening to what the
And,
media
and anyway,
Dr.
I
Fauci
was
says.
told to blame the government's health advice, so
Yes,
I'm
it's
going
the
to
government.
do that.
The government made me shun you, my dear child. So, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Don't worry about it, people. It's all fine. This is normal. This is fine. This is normal. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. Happy Christmas.
We're not there yet.
Happy Halloween. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Black Friday.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
for
Black
American
Friday.
listeners, yeah.
Black Friday is a worldwide thing now, no?
It's
like
in
it's
Europe,
spread
for
like
sure.
it's spread like a virus around the world. Black Friday.
Yeah. Black Friday, they call it in France.
Black Friday.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they're saying. Black Friday. It's English. I don't know what the fuck you mean. So yeah, happy Black Friday. Go out there to your local Walmart or your local whatever and wreck the place, and but just socially distance while you're doing it.
Wreck the place.
Wreck the place, steal all the stuff, beat people up to get the latest flat screen TV, but make sure you socially distance while you're doing it, because you'll get the virus and die immediately. That's all we have to say on the topic for this week, folks.
Got a
Thanks
lot more next
for yeah, there'll be a lot more next week. Thanks for watching, listening, whatever you're doing. Thanks to our commentators for commentating or running commentary. 1,944 have died in Australia with COVID in the last 21 months in a country of 25 million. Yep, that's what I call a deadly pandemic.
Crikey.
Crikey. It's a disaster.
That's what you should disown your family over, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, guys, for watching, listening, commenting. Really important. Smash all the buttons, like everything. And we'll be back next week with another show. Until then, you all have a good week. and stay safe and shut up and get the vaccine.
See you next week.
Or not.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.